The emergency beacon pierced through the cosmic static like a dying scream. Ambassador Zephyr 9's crystalline form trembled as the distress signal reached the Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime. Around the massive circular table, representatives from 47 different species sat in stunned silence. The holographic display showed devastating images from the Outer Rim territories, entire star systems consumed by an unstoppable darkness. "The Devourers have returned," whispered Council Speaker Thane, his 6 arms gesturing helplessly at the display. The ancient enemy that had once nearly destroyed all life in the galaxy millions of years ago was back, and they were more powerful than ever. Zephyr 9's melodic voice rang through the chamber like wind chimes in a storm. "Our defensive fleets have fallen. The Kepler defense grid is gone. 17 colonies have been completely consumed, their populations absorbed into the Devourer Collective." The representatives erupted into panicked chatter. The Mentari clicked their mandibles in distress, while the gaseous nebulons flickered between colors of fear. Everyone knew the stories. The Devourers didn't just kill, they absorbed entire civilizations, adding their knowledge and biological distinctiveness to their ever-growing collective consciousness. Fleet Admiral Korath of the Draconian Empire slammed his scaled fist on the table. "Our combined military might couldn't even slow them down. What hope do we have?" "Perhaps," came a small voice from the corner, "we should consider the forbidden option." All eyes turned to Historian Vex, a small, gray-skinned Archivian who rarely spoke during council sessions. Her large black eyes held ancient knowledge that made even the eldest council members uncomfortable. "Speak your mind, Historian," Speaker Thane commanded. Vex stood slowly, her frail form dwarfed by the towering representatives around her. "In the deepest archives there are records. Classified documents from the First Devourer War. There was a species that helped turn the tide, a young race from the Outer Rim that the Council barely acknowledged at the time." "What species?" demanded Admiral Korath. "Humans," Vex said quietly, "from a death world called Earth." The chamber fell silent. Death worlds were legendary in galactic society, planets so hostile that any species evolving there would be considered impossibly dangerous. Most civilized species avoided Deathworld inhabitants entirely. "The records are incomplete," Vex continued, "but it appears these humans were instrumental in the final victory against the Devourers. Their homeworld was classified as forbidden afterward, and all contact was severed by council decree." Speaker Thane's feathered crest bristled. For good reason. Deathworlders are unpredictable, violent, and dangerous to civilized society. More dangerous than extinction? Zephyr 9's crystalline form chimed with desperate harmony. The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Outside the great windows of the council chamber, they could see the refugee ships arriving by the thousands. Entire civilizations packed into whatever vessels they could find, fleeing the advancing darkness that consumed everything in its path. Admiral Korath pulled up tactical displays on his personal console. "Show me these human territories." Vex transmitted the ancient star charts. A small sector in what was now considered the galactic backwater. Dozens of systems marked with warning beacons and quarantine symbols. "According to our oldest records," Vex explained, Earth spawned a species that survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and dozens of mass extinction events. They evolved as persistence hunters on a world where almost everything was trying to kill them. "What kind of weapons do they possess?" asked the Mantari war chief, her compound eyes focusing intently on the data. "The records are unclear about their technology," Vex admitted. "But they mentioned something called human stubbornness and pack-bonding behavior as their most dangerous traits." Several representatives laughed nervously. How could personality traits be weapons? The great doors of the chamber suddenly burst open. A communications officer rushed in, his usually calm demeanor shattered. "Speaker, the Devourer fleet has broken through the Centauri line. They're moving toward the core worlds. We have perhaps 6 months before they reach Nexus Prime itself." The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives began shouting demands for evacuation ships while others called for last-ditch military strikes. Through it all, Zephyr 9's crystalline voice somehow cut through the noise. "If we're going to contact these humans, we need to decide now. Every day we delay is another system consumed." Speaker Thane's feathers had turned the deep purple of desperation. "The Council has maintained the human quarantine for 3,000 years. We classified them as too dangerous for galactic society, and now we need dangerous, Admiral Korath growled. My fleets are scattered. Our best weapons barely scratch their ships. Traditional warfare has failed. Historian Vex pulled up more ancient files. The old records mention that humans have a saying, when you're going through hell, keep going. They apparently view impossible odds as a personal challenge rather than a reason to surrender. The massive chamber fell quiet again, as each representative contemplated their options. Outside, another wave of refugee ships darkened the sky. Somewhere in the distance, an entire civilization was being digested by an enemy that viewed all other life as merely food to be processed. What exactly are we voting on? Asked the ethereal representative, her voice like whispered starlight. Speaker Thane stood, his full height imposing even among the diverse assembly. We vote on whether to break 3 millennia of quarantine protocols and contact a species we deemed too dangerous for civilized space. We vote on whether to potentially invite another threat into our galaxy while we're already fighting for survival. Or, Zephyr 9 chimed softly, we vote on whether to give our galaxy one last chance to survive. The vote was called. One by one, the representatives of 47 species raised their appendages, activated their consoles, or signaled their choice through whatever method their biology allowed. Some voted with resignation, others with desperate hope, and a few with the grim determination of those who had already lost everything. When the final tally appeared on the great display, it showed a narrow majority in favor of contact. Speaker Thane's voice carried the weight of galactic history as he made the announcement. By council decree, we hereby authorize the breaking of quarantine protocols surrounding the human territories. May whatever gods we worship have mercy on us all. As the session ended and representatives hurried to their respective homeworlds to prepare for either salvation or a second apocalypse, Historian Vex remained behind, staring at the ancient human star charts. Somewhere in that forbidden sector of space, a species that had survived their own worlds, attempts to kill them was about to receive a call for help from a galaxy that had shunned them for 3,000 years. The real question wasn't whether humanity would answer. The question was what they had become during their long isolation. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the USEC Wanderer, watching the stars that had been humanity's only companions for 3,000 years. The ship drifted silently through the asteroid field that marked the outer boundary of human space, its sensors scanning for anything unusual. What they found instead was something impossible. Captain, came the voice of Lieutenant Rodriguez from the bridge. We're picking up a transmission on ancient council frequencies. It's addressed to humanity. Sarah's coffee mug paused halfway to her lips. Council frequencies hadn't been heard in human space since the Great Isolation began. Are you certain it's legitimate? Running it through every verification protocol we have. The encryption keys match historical records, and the source signature is definitely from Nexus Prime. It's real. Captain, Sarah made her way to the bridge, her magnetic boots clicking against the metal deck plates. The Wanderer was one of the newer exploration vessels in humanity's modest fleet, built for long-range reconnaissance and peaceful contact with whatever they might find in the vast emptiness beyond the quarantine zone. The bridge crew looked up expectantly as she entered. They were a mixed group representing humanity's evolution during their isolation. Lieutenant Rodriguez's family had originated from Earth's South America. Navigator Kim traced her lineage to the Korean Peninsula. Engineer Okafor's ancestors had lived in West Africa. Despite spreading across dozens of worlds, humans had maintained their diverse heritage while developing into something more unified than their ancestors could have imagined. Put it on speakers, Sarah commanded. The transmission crackled with static from its long journey across space. The voice that emerged was clearly artificial, probably run through multiple translation matrices to convert alien concepts into human language. To the human species, greetings from the Galactic Council. We acknowledge that contact was severed by mutual agreement 3,000 years ago. However, circumstances have arisen that require us to request your assistance. The Devourer Collective has returned and threatens all life in the galaxy. Our traditional military forces have proven insufficient. We formally request humanitarian aid and military cooperation. Please respond on this frequency if you are willing to discuss terms. The bridge fell silent. Sarah stared at the communications console as if it might provide answers to questions that hadn't been asked in millennia. Captain, Navigator Kim said quietly, according to our historical databases, the Devourers were the reason we got involved with galactic politics in the first place. Our ancestors helped fight them off before the isolation. I remember the stories, Sarah replied. The question is, what have we become since then? Engineer Okafor pulled up tactical displays. Our current military consists mainly of system defense platforms and exploration vessels like this one. We haven't built warships in over 1,000 years. Because we haven't needed them, Rodriguez added. Human space is peaceful. We've had minor conflicts, but nothing requiring serious military hardware. Sarah walked to the main display and pulled up a map of known space. The human sectors appeared as a small cluster of blue dots surrounded by vast emptiness. Beyond that lay the quarantine boundary, and beyond that the galaxy that had rejected them. What do we know about our current capabilities? She asked. Technologically, we've advanced significantly during the isolation, Kim reported. Our drive systems are more efficient. Our materials science is extremely advanced, and our AI integration is probably beyond anything the Council species have developed. But, Sarah sensed there was more. But we focused on exploration, research, and peaceful development. Our weapons technology is probably primitive compared to dedicated military species. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. During the isolation, humanity had indeed focused on building rather than destroying. They had terraformed dozens of worlds, established thriving colonies, and developed technologies that prioritize sustainability and cooperation over conquest. There's something else, Captain, Rodriguez said hesitantly. I've been running projections based on the historical data about Devourer tactics. If they're really back and as powerful as this transmission suggests, then eventually they're going to reach human space too. The implication hung heavy in the recycled air of the bridge. Isolation had protected humanity from galactic politics, but it wouldn't protect them from an enemy that consumed everything in its path. Open a channel to Earth Command, Sarah ordered. Priority Alpha. We need to convene the Council of Worlds immediately. The next several hours passed in a blur of encrypted communications. Emergency sessions and heated debates broadcast across human space. The 37 worlds that comprised human civilization each had a voice in the decision and each had concerns. New Geneva favored immediate response, arguing that humanity had a moral obligation to help. The mining colonies of the Asteroid Confederation worried about leaving their territory undefended. The research stations around Proxima wanted more information before committing to anything. Sarah found herself in the unique position of being the ranking military officer who had actually received the transmission. Her testimony carried significant weight in the discussions. The galaxy that exiled us is asking for help, she told the assembled representatives. The same council that deemed us too dangerous for civilized space now needs that danger to survive. What do we owe them? Asked Representative Martinez from New Barcelona. They made it clear we weren't welcome. Why should we risk human lives for species that rejected us? Because, came an unexpected voice from the back of the virtual assembly. It's what humans do. All eyes turned to the speaker, an elderly woman with silver hair and keen eyes. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the last living person born on original Earth, and at 180 years old. A walking piece of human history, Dr. Warren, the moderator acknowledged respectfully. I was a child when the isolation began, she said, her voice carrying the weight of lived experience. I remember the debates then too. The galaxy called us violent, unpredictable, dangerous. They weren't entirely wrong. But they missed the point. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Humans aren't dangerous because we're violent. We're dangerous because we don't give up. When something threatens what we care about, we find a way to fight it, even if the odds are impossible. When someone needs help, we help them, even if they've wronged us before. The Council species evolved on garden worlds, Dr. Warren continued. They developed civilization in safety and comfort. They think in terms of acceptable losses and strategic retreats. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We think in terms of survival and protecting the pack. The assembly listened in respectful silence as she continued. 3,000 years ago, our ancestors agreed to the isolation because they believed it would preserve peace. But they also left instructions, sealed in the deepest archives on Earth. Instructions for this exact situation. Sarah felt her breath catch. What instructions? Dr. Warren smiled sadly. If the galaxy ever calls for help against the Devourers, humanity answers. Not because we forgive the exile. Not because we expect gratitude, but because it's who we are. The vote when it came was unanimous. 37 worlds speaking with one voice across the vastness of space chose to answer the call. Captain Chen, came the official order. You are hereby authorized to respond to the Galactic Council transmission. Inform them that humanity will provide assistance. Then get ready to remind the galaxy why they were afraid of us in the first place. The first human ship to cross the quarantine boundary in 3,000 years was not a warship. The USEC Messenger was a diplomatic vessel, sleek and unarmored, carrying only defensive systems and a crew of 12. Captain Chen had volunteered to make the crossing personally, knowing that this moment would reshape both human and galactic history. Crossing the boundary now, Navigator Kim announced as they passed the ancient warning beacons. We are officially in galactic space. The crew watched their displays with mixture of excitement and apprehension. Long-range sensors immediately began picking up signs of civilization that had been absent from human space for millennia. Trade routes, communication networks, and the electromagnetic signatures of billions of inhabited worlds stretched out before them. They also detected something else. The outer rim territories showed dark zones where no signals originated. Empty. Spaces where star systems should have been broadcasting the normal chatter of civilization. The Devourers have been busy, Rodriguez observed grimly. Captain Communications Officer Patel announced, We're being hailed by a Galactic Council patrol fleet. They're requesting identification and stating their intention to escort us to Nexus Prime. Accept their escort, Sarah replied. Open a channel. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of an alien vessel. The commander appeared to be a member of the draconian species, tall, scaled, with intelligent reptilian eyes that studied the human crew with obvious curiosity and wariness. This is Fleet Commander Vask of the Council Defense Force. You are the human delegation? Captain Sarah Chen of the United Systems Exploration Command. We received your request for assistance. Vask's expression was difficult to read, but his body language suggested controlled surprise. I will escort you to Nexus Prime immediately. Be advised that Council security protocols are in effect throughout the core systems. During the 3-day journey to the galactic capital, Sarah and her crew learned much about what had transpired during humanity's absence. The galaxy had grown more unified under Council leadership, but also more rigid. Wars between species had largely ended, replaced by regulated competition and diplomatic solutions. Technology had advanced along predictable paths, focused on efficiency and safety. It was a more peaceful galaxy than the one humanity had left behind. It was also a more fragile one. They've forgotten how to fight, Navigator Kim observed as they studied the escort fleet's formations. Look at their tactics. All defensive positioning, no aggressive maneuvering capabilities. 3,000 years of peace will do that, Sarah replied. The question is whether we still remember how to fight. When they finally arrived at Nexus Prime, the sight took their breath away. The galactic capital had grown into a massive space construct surrounding a small star. Hundreds of billions of beings lived and worked in the orbital habitats, representing every known species in the galaxy, except humans. The messenger was guided to a diplomatic docking bay, where an impressive reception committee waited. Sarah recognized several species from historical records, draconians, ethereals, Mantari, and others that were completely new to human knowledge. Ambassador Zephyr 9's crystalline form chimed a greeting as the human delegation disembarked. Captain Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Council, welcome to Nexus Prime. Your arrival gives us hope in these dark times. Sarah nodded diplomatically. We came as soon as we received your message. I understand the situation is urgent. More urgent than you know, came a new voice. Speaker Thane approached, his feathered form imposing despite his obvious exhaustion. The Devourer advance fleet reached the Kepler system yesterday. They're moving faster than our projections indicated. The human delegation was escorted through corridors that showcased the best of galactic civilization. Art, music, and architecture from dozens of species created a harmony that was both beautiful and sterile. Everything was perfectly designed, efficiently planned, and utterly predictable. The council chambers had been modified for this special session. Representatives from 47 species gathered to witness humanity's return to galactic affairs. Many stared openly at the humans, trying to reconcile the legends of dangerous Deathworlders with the seemingly ordinary beings before them. Before we discuss military cooperation, Speaker Thane began, the Council requires assurance that humanity has evolved beyond the aggressive tendencies that necessitated the original quarantine. Sarah exchanged glances with her team. This was the moment they had prepared for. Speaker Thane, she replied carefully, humanity has indeed evolved during our isolation. We've built a peaceful confederation of worlds, eliminated poverty and conflict within our space, and dedicated ourselves to exploration and research. Murmurs of approval rippled through the assembly. However, Sarah continued, you didn't call us here because you needed peaceful researchers. You called us because you needed what you've always considered our most dangerous trait, our refusal to accept defeat. The murmurs stopped. Fleet Admiral Korath leaned forward. What exactly are you offering? Our records indicate that humans were effective against the Devourers because we approached warfare differently than other species. We want to understand exactly what you're facing before we commit our resources. Historian Vex activated the main display, showing recent battle recordings. The humans watched in silence as Council fleets engaged massive Devourer ships. The enemy vessels were organic-looking constructs that seemed to absorb energy weapons and grow stronger from each attack. When they consumed a Council ship, they incorporated its technology and crew into their collective mass. Traditional warfare is ineffective, Admiral Korath explained. Energy weapons feed them. Projectile weapons barely scratch their hulls. They adapt to our tactics faster than we can develop new ones. How many ships do they have? Rodriguez asked. Intelligence estimates suggest a primary fleet of over 10,000 vessels, with countless smaller ships and swarms of fighter craft. Sarah's crew studied the tactical data with professional interest. After several minutes, Engineer Okafor spoke up. Your weapons are too clean, he said quietly. Explain, Admiral Korath demanded. You're using directed energy, plasma, and other sophisticated systems. The Devourers absorb energy and incorporate technology. But what happens when you hit them with something crude? Okafor pulled up specifications for human ships. Our vessels still use chemical rockets for backup propulsion, kinetic weapons for asteroid mining, and nuclear reactors for power. We never fully abandoned older technologies because they're reliable. You're suggesting primitive weapons might be more effective? Zephyr 9's crystalline form chimed with skepticism. I'm suggesting that sometimes the answer isn't more sophisticated, Sarah replied. Sometimes it's more stubborn. She activated her personal communicator and spoke a few words in rapid human. Within minutes, the display showed new information being transmitted from human space. This is the current status of human military forces, Sarah announced. We have 37 worlds, each with its own defense fleet. Our total naval strength is approximately 3,000 vessels. The Council representatives looked confused. 3,000 ships against 10,000 seemed like a hopeless mismatch. However, Sarah continued, every human ship is also a potential weapons platform. Every human world is a fortress. Every human civilian is trained in emergency protocols that include combat readiness. You're talking about total war, Speaker Thane said with obvious horror. We're talking about survival, Sarah replied. The Devourers don't take prisoners, they don't negotiate. They consume everything. Fighting them isn't a military operation. It's an extermination campaign. What are you proposing? Admiral Korath asked. Sarah looked around the chamber at representatives of dozens of species that had enjoyed peace for millennia. They were about to learn what humans had always known, that sometimes peace was only possible because someone was willing to do violence to preserve it. We propose a joint fleet with human tactical doctrine, combined council technology with human operational philosophy, your advanced systems with our primitive determination. And if you fail? Speaker Thane asked. Then we'll fail while moving forward, Sarah replied. Because that's what humans do. We keep going until we win or there's nothing left to protect. The vote to approve joint operations was unanimous. As the session ended, Sarah couldn't help but notice the mixture of hope and fear in the alien faces around her. They wanted humanity's help, but they were beginning to remember why they had been afraid of humans in the first place. Outside the great windows of Nexus Prime, stars that had shone for billions of years were going dark as the Devourers approached. Soon the galaxy would learn whether its greatest outcasts had become its salvation. Admiral Marcus Webb stood in the war room aboard the newly commissioned vessel UCS Defiance, studying holographic displays that showed the largest military mobilization in human history. Around him, officers from 37 worlds worked alongside their galactic counterparts, creating something that had never existed before, a truly integrated fleet. The transformation had taken only 6 weeks. Human industrial capacity, dormant for millennia, had awakened with terrifying efficiency. Shipyards that had built exploration vessels now cranked out warships with modifications that made Council engineers nervous. Weapons that hadn't been manufactured in 1,000 years rolled off production lines alongside completely new designs born from human Council technological fusion. Report, Webb commanded as Captain Chen entered the war room. The Terran contingent has completed integration with the 5th Council fleet, she announced. Commander Rodriguez reports all systems operational and crew training at optimal levels. Webb nodded, though his expression remained grim. Through the massive windows of the command center, he could see the assembled armada. 2,000 Council vessels of various classes floated in formation, alongside 800 human ships. The human vessels looked different, angular where Council ships were curved, armored where Council ships relied on shields, and bristling with weapons that seemed almost primitive compared to the elegant energy systems of their allies. What's the latest intelligence on the Devourer advance? Webb asked. Lieutenant Commander Kim, now serving as Fleet Intelligence Coordinator, activated the main display. Red markers showed enemy positions spreading like an infection across the outer rim. They've consumed the Arcturus system completely. 17 billion beings absorbed into their collective. Our scouts report the Devourer fleet has grown to over 12,000 ships, and they're beginning to incorporate Council technology into their organic systems. Weaknesses? Analysis of the battle recording suggests they struggle with rapid tactical changes. They adapt quickly to specific weapons or strategies, but seem to have difficulty when facing multiple simultaneous threats using different approaches. Webb studied the tactical data. The Devourers fought like a single organism, which gave them incredible coordination but also created potential vulnerabilities. What about their command structure? Unknown, sir. They appear to operate as a collective consciousness, but we haven't identified any central command ships or key nodes. Sir? Interrupted Communications Officer Patel. Incoming priority transmission from human space. It's Admiral Harrison from the Colonial Defense Force. The holographic display shifted to show a weathered woman in her 70s, standing on the bridge of a ship Webb didn't recognize. Behind her, crew members moved with the efficient precision of veterans. Marcus, Admiral Harrison said without preamble, the civilian evacuation is complete. Every non-essential human has been moved to the deep system fortresses. We're ready to implement Protocol 7. Webb felt a chill. Protocol 7 was humanity's ultimate contingency plan. The complete militarization of human space in preparation for total war. Every ship, every station, every world would become part of the war effort. Confirmed, Admiral. Execute Protocol 7. Understood. And Marcus? The kids want to know if they can use the big toys now. Despite the gravity of the situation, Webb almost smiled. The kids were humanity's Special Projects Division. Scientists and engineers who had spent decades developing technologies that seemed more like weapons of mass destruction than tools of exploration. Tell them yes. Full authorization for all experimental systems. The transmission ended and Webb turned back to his staff. Any word from our advanced scouts? Yes, sir, Kim replied. The reconnaissance force has made contact with the Devourer advance guard at the Rigel system. Initial engagement is underway. The main display shifted to show real-time tactical data transmitted from the battle zone. A small force of human and Council ships was engaged with the leading edge of the Devourer fleet. 3. Massive organic vessels supported by clouds of smaller craft. Order. The reconnaissance force to withdraw according to plan, Webb commanded. It's time to see if our theories about Devourer behavior are correct. The retreat was carefully orchestrated. Human ships used their superior acceleration to stay just out of range while Council vessels employed hit-and-run tactics that frustrated Devourer attempts to close and absorb them. The enemy fleet followed exactly as predicted. "They're taking the bait," Kim reported. "Devourer fleet is pursuing our forces toward the Vega system." Webb nodded grimly. Vega was where they would make their stand. The system had been carefully prepared over the past 6 weeks, transformed from a peaceful research outpost into the most heavily fortified position in galactic history. "Send the signal," Webb ordered. "All fleets execute Operation Hammerfall." Across the galaxy, the largest coordinated military movement in known history began. Human vessels dropped out of hyperspace at precisely calculated positions, their primitive but effective drives allowing them to arrive exactly on schedule. Council fleets emerged from behind planets and asteroids where they had been hiding. Using advanced stealth technology, the Devourer fleet found itself surrounded. "Enemy fleet count is now 14,000 vessels," Kim announced. "They're attempting to break through our perimeter." "Let them try," Webb replied. "All ships commence firing. Execute Tactical Plan Alpha 7. The first salvos lit up space with unprecedented violence. Council ships opened fire with their sophisticated energy weapons while human vessels unleashed torrents of kinetic projectiles, nuclear warheads, and something new, weapons that deliberately used outdated technology. The results were immediately apparent. Devourer ships that easily absorbed energy weapons found themselves taking significant damage from simple explosive devices and high-velocity metal slugs. Their adaptation processes, designed to counter advanced technology, struggled with weapons that operated on basic physics principles. "Direct hit on the lead Devourer vessel," reported the tactical officer. "Their shields are ineffective against kinetic impacts, but the Devourers weren't helpless. As the battle progressed, their organic ships began to adapt, growing armor plating and defensive systems specifically designed to counter human weapons. What made them truly dangerous, however, was their ability to learn from every fallen ship they absorbed. "Sir," Kim called out urgently, "the Devourers are incorporating our destroyed vessels into their fleet. They're adding our weapons to their organic systems." Webb watched as destroyed Council ships were consumed and rebuilt as hybrid Devourer Council vessels, now immune to the weapons that had destroyed them. It was exactly what human strategists had predicted. "Phase 2, Webb announced calmly. "All human vessels. Execute Doctrine Crazy Ivan." What happened next would be studied in military academies for centuries to come. Instead of continuing to use the same weapons that the Devourers were adapting to, human ships began switching tactics every few minutes. Kinetic weapons gave way to chemical explosives, which were replaced by electromagnetic pulse devices, which yielded to crude but effective ramming attacks. The Devourers' adaptation process, so effective against predictable Council tactics, couldn't keep up with the constant changes. Every time they developed a defense against one human weapon system, the humans had already moved on to something else. "They're becoming confused," Kim reported with barely concealed excitement. "Devourer formations are breaking down. They can't maintain coordination while trying to adapt to multiple different threats simultaneously." But Webb knew the real test was yet to come. The Devourers weren't just a military force. They were a collective consciousness that had consumed entire civilizations. Their true power lay not in their ships but in their ability to overwhelm and absorb their enemies. "Sir," the communications officer announced, "we're receiving boarding alerts from 17 ships across the fleet. Devourer boarding craft have penetrated our hulls." This was what Webb had been waiting for. The moment when the galaxy would learn what 3,000 years of isolation had really done to humanity. "All ships with boarding parties," Webb commanded. "Execute Protocol Omega." Throughout the fleet, human Marines who had been specially prepared for this moment began to engage Devourer boarding parties in close combat. But these weren't the same humans who had left galactic society 3 millennia ago. These were humans who had spent 1,000 generations preparing for exactly this fight. The Devourers were about to learn why the galaxy had called them Deathworlders in the first place. The new Terra system erupted into the largest battle in galactic history. The Devourer fleet, now swollen to over 15,000 ships from their absorbed victims, faced a defense network that had been designed and refined for 3,000 years by a species that had taken the concept of prepared to levels that bordered on obsessive. Admiral Webb stood on the bridge of the UCS Determination, watching as the trap closed around the enemy fleet. The massive vessel was the culmination of human military engineering. A ship so large it had its own gravity wells, armed with weapons that deliberately rejected advanced technology in favor of brute force effectiveness. All defense platforms are active, reported Commander Chen from her position at the tactical station. Orbital fortresses are fully operational. The asteroid belt weapons grid is online. Webb nodded grimly. Every piece of rock larger than a house in the new Terra system had been converted into a weapons platform over the past 3 millennia. Millions of hidden installations, each armed with simple but devastating kinetic weapons, now revealed themselves as the Devourer fleet moved deeper into the system. "Fire," Webb commanded. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of weapons platforms opened fire simultaneously, filling space with a storm of tungsten rods, depleted uranium slugs, and chemical explosives that moved at significant fractions of light speed. The primitive weapons couldn't be absorbed by Devourer technology because they operated on principles so basic that there was nothing to absorb. Direct hits across the enemy fleet, Chen reported. Devourer vessels are taking significant damage, but they're beginning to adapt their hull configurations. Webb watched as the organic enemy ships started growing thicker armor and developing point defense systems designed to intercept kinetic projectiles. It was impressive, but it was also exactly what human strategists had anticipated. "Execute protocol escalation," Webb ordered. Throughout the system, human weapons platforms began switching ammunition types. Kinetic rounds gave way to chemical explosives, which were replaced by electromagnetic pulse devices, which yielded to something truly unexpected. Weapons that fired chunks of compressed garbage at relativistic velocities. The Devourer's adaptation systems, designed to counter sophisticated military technology, simply couldn't process the concept of being attacked with refuse moving at near light speed. Their collective consciousness struggled to categorize threats that included everything from nuclear warheads to literally throwing rocks very, very hard. But the real surprise was yet to come. "Admiral," the communications officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the Prometheus deployment ships. Dr. Kim reports that the experimental weapons are in position." Webb took a deep breath. Project Prometheus represented the absolute pinnacle of human military thinking. Weapons so crude and overwhelming that even the Devourers couldn't adapt fast enough to counter them. "Deploy Prometheus devices," Webb commanded. Across the battlefield, 12 unmarked human ships suddenly changed course and dove directly toward the largest concentrations of Devourer vessels. The enemy fleet tried to intercept them, but the ships were heavily armored and protected by escort squadrons of human fighters that flew with a reckless aggression that made Council observers uncomfortable. The first Prometheus device detonated in the heart of a Devourer formation, and the results were immediately visible across the entire system. The explosion wasn't nuclear or antimatter, it was something far more primitive and therefore far more effective against an enemy that absorbed advanced technology. The device was essentially a massive hydrogen bomb enhanced with human ingenuity, but instead of trying to contain or direct the explosion, human engineers had deliberately made it as dirty and chaotic as possible. The blast released not just energy, but a cloud of radioactive debris, electromagnetic pulses, and gravitational distortions that completely overwhelmed Devourer adaptation systems. "Prometheus 1 successful," reported Dr. Kim from her command center. "Devourer collective consciousness in the target area has been completely disrupted. They're operating as individual ships now, not as a coordinated fleet." Webb smiled grimly. The Devourer's greatest strength was their hive mind, which allowed perfect coordination across their entire fleet. But that same hive mind became a vulnerability when it was disrupted by weapons that operated outside their understanding. 11 more Prometheus devices detonated across the battlefield, each one creating zones of chaos where Devourer ships suddenly found themselves cut off from their collective consciousness and fighting as confused individuals instead of parts of a unified organism. "Enemy fleet cohesion is breaking down," Chen reported. "Individual Devourer ships are beginning to flee the system." But Webb wasn't finished. For 3,000 years, humans had prepared for this exact scenario, and they had learned from their ancestors' mistakes during the first Devourer War. This time they weren't going to let any escape to regroup and adapt. All units, execute Operation Final Solution, Webb commanded. What happened next would be remembered as the moment humanity revealed what 3 millennia of isolation had truly accomplished. Every human ship in the fleet suddenly accelerated toward the fleeing Devourer vessels, not to engage them in traditional combat, but to ram them at relativistic velocities. The humans had built their ships specifically for this moment, vessels designed to survive impact with enemy hulls long enough to deliver their payloads. Each ship carried a crew in protected compartments and a cargo hold full of the most primitive and effective weapons human ingenuity could devise. Ramming speed, Webb announced as the Determination herself joined the charge. The massive vessel, accelerating toward the largest remaining Devourer ship, represented everything humanity had become during their exile. They were no longer the young species that had helped fight the Devourers 3,000 years ago. They had evolved into something that even they found slightly frightening, a civilization that had turned preparation for total war into an art form. The collision between the Determination and the Devourer flagship was visible from 3 star systems away. The human ship punched through the enemy vessel's hull and detonated her entire arsenal in the enemy's core systems. The explosion didn't just destroy the Devourer ship, it disrupted the hive mind connection across the entire remaining fleet. Admiral, Chen called out as emergency systems activated throughout the ship. Hull breaches on all decks, but structural integrity is holding. Damage control teams are responding. Webb pulled himself up from where the impact had thrown him and looked at the tactical display. The Devourer fleet was in complete disarray. Ships that had operated as extensions of a single will now drifted helplessly, their crews struggling to function as individuals for the first time in millions of years. All surviving units, Webb broadcast across the joint fleet, commence cleanup operations. No survivors. The battle that followed wasn't really a battle, it was an extermination. Human and council ships methodically hunted down every remaining Devourer vessel, ensuring that none escaped to carry word of human tactics back to any other Devourer forces that might exist. When the shooting finally stopped 12 hours later, the new Terra system was filled with debris from the largest fleet battle in galactic history. Of the 15,000 Devourer ships that had entered the system, exactly 0 remained intact. Sir, Chen reported quietly. Casualty reports from all units. Webb braced himself. The victory had been total, but the cost in human lives would be enormous. Human casualties, 237 killed in action, 412 wounded. Council casualties, 53 killed, 97 wounded. Webb stared at the numbers. In a battle involving nearly 20,000 ships and tens of millions of combatants, human casualties had been remarkably light. The Devourers, for all their terrifying power, simply hadn't been prepared to fight an enemy that treated desperate odds as a personal challenge. Send a message to the Galactic Council, Webb ordered. The Devourer threat has been eliminated. The galaxy is safe. As news of the victory spread throughout known space, reactions varied dramatically. The Council species celebrated their salvation, while simultaneously beginning to worry about what humanity had become during their isolation. The humans themselves felt a mixture of relief and sadness. They had saved the galaxy that had exiled them, but in doing so they had revealed themselves to be far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Captain Sarah Chen, now standing in the ruins of a Devourer ship that her boarding party had captured intact, made a discovery that would shape the future of human-galactic relations. Hidden in the enemy vessel's organic computers was intelligence about other Devourer fleets operating in distant galaxies, threats that the Council had never imagined. Admiral, she reported, we need to talk. This wasn't their main fleet. This was just the advanced scouts. Webb closed his eyes and sighed. Humanity had answered the galaxy's call for help and saved countless billions of lives. But in the process, they had revealed themselves to be the most dangerous species in known space. And they had learned that the threats facing the galaxy were far greater than anyone had realized. The Devourers were defeated, but the real test of human-galactic relations was just beginning. The galaxy had called for help for fight the Devourers 3,000 years ago. They had evolved into something that even they found slightly frightening, a civilization that had turned preparation for total war into an art form. The collision between the Determination and the Devourer flagship was visible from 3 star systems away. The human ship punched through the enemy vessel's hull and detonated her entire arsenal in the enemy's core systems. The explosion didn't just destroy the Devourer ship. It disrupted the hive-mind connection across the entire remaining fleet. "Admiral," Chen called out as emergency systems activated throughout the ship. "Hull breaches on all decks, but structural integrity is holding. Damage control teams are responding." Webb pulled himself up from where the impact had thrown him and looked at the tactical display. The Devourer fleet was in complete disarray. Ships that had operated as extensions of a single will now drifted helplessly, their crews struggling to function as individuals for the first time in millions of years. "All surviving units," Webb broadcast across the joint fleet, "commence cleanup operations." No survivors. The battle that followed wasn't really a battle, it was an extermination. Human and Council ships methodically hunted down every remaining Devourer vessel, ensuring that none escaped to carry word of human tactics back to any other Devourer forces that might exist. When the shooting finally stopped 12 hours later, the new Terra system was filled with debris from the largest fleet battle in galactic history. Of the 15,000 Devourer ships that had entered the system, exactly 0 remained intact. "Sir," Chen reported quietly, "casualty reports from all units." Webb braced himself. The victory had been total, but the cost in human lives would be enormous. Human casualties: 237 killed in action, 412 wounded. Council casualties: 53 killed, 97 wounded. Webb stared at the numbers. In a battle involving nearly 20,000 ships and tens of millions of combatants, human casualties had been remarkably light. The Devourers, for all their terrifying power, simply hadn't been prepared to fight an enemy that treated desperate odds as a personal challenge. "Send a message to the Galactic Council," Webb ordered. "The Devourer threat has been eliminated. The galaxy is safe." As news of the victory spread throughout known space, reactions varied dramatically. The Council species celebrated their salvation, while simultaneously beginning to worry about what humanity had become during their isolation. The humans themselves felt a mixture of relief and sadness. They had saved the galaxy that had exiled them, but in doing so, they had revealed themselves to be far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Captain Sarah Chen, now standing in the ruins of a Devourer ship that her boarding party had captured intact, made a discovery that would shape the future of human galactic relations. Hidden in the enemy vessel's organic computers was intelligence about other Devourer fleets operating in distant galaxies, threats that the Council had never imagined. "Admiral," she reported, "we need to talk." This wasn't their main fleet. This was just the advanced scouts. Webb closed his eyes and sighed. Humanity had answered the galaxy's call for help and saved countless billions of lives, but in the process, they had revealed themselves to be the most dangerous species in known space, and they had learned that the threats facing the galaxy were far greater than anyone had realized. The Devourers were defeated, but the real test of human galactic relations was just beginning. The galaxy had called for help from the Deathworlders, and the Deathworlders had answered. Now everyone would have to live with the consequences. Outside the windows of the Determination, stars that had been dark were beginning to shine again as the Devourer shadow lifted from the galaxy. But in the depths of space, other shadows were moving, and humanity was no longer content to remain in isolation. The galaxy had wanted help from the Deathworlders. Now it was going to discover the Deathworlders didn't do anything halfway.